financial services sector and strong commitment to community services, will deliver his talk on balanced participation and effective governance to us.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, please join us in welcoming Mr. Antony Leung. Mr. Leung, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure and honor to be here to speak to you at this inaugural fundraising dinner of the Lingnan University. It is indeed hard to resist the invitation from Rex, Leonard, and Albert. One is my former schoolmate. Leonard was my, in a way, team members when I was at the UGC, and Albert was my former colleague. So despite having a conflicting schedule, I've agreed to come and change the other's schedule. The topic that I've chosen to speak today is a fairly topical one that relates to the political reform, and possibly one that is being hotly debated about. But I thought that since the government is going to present a bill to the Legislative Council in about 2 weeks' time, I would like to share my view on this particular topic. First, talking about balanced participation, why I believe that this is fitting and good for Hong Kong. And then I'll talk about effective governance. A lot of discussion has been held on how to elect or select a government, but I believe more should be discussed hopefully later on after the voting on the bill on how to improve the governance in Hong Kong. The purpose of all political reform is to attain equilibrium between balanced participation and effective governance. Hong Kong's political reform is no exception. As a special administrative region of the People's Republic of China, with a high degree of autonomy, Hong Kong's political reform is both special and difficult, whether viewed from legal status, political framework, and culture, and so forth. Thus, to get going with our political reform, there must be reasonable objectives and expectations for each phase, as well as full consideration of the equilibrium between balanced participation and effective governance. Under its existing political structure, the SAR's political reform, of which universal suffrage for the election of the chief executive is an integral part, must be based on the following. First, Hong Kong is not an independent country. It is an SAR with a high degree of autonomy authorized by the central government. Second, ours is an effective-led government, not one where political parties compete to obtain the right to rule. Third, the power of Hong Kong's executive, judiciary, and legislative branches stems from the authorization of the central government. Fourth, while the chief executive is the representative of the central government, he is also the representative of the Hong Kong people. The former role is based on the authorization of the central government. The latter is based on the approval and authorization of the Hong Kong people with the permission of the central government. Notably, the two cannot be separated from each other. The idea of balanced participation is to net all those who are empowered to have a chance to participate extensively in political governance. The final objective is to arrive at a consensus that pays due regard to the interests of all concerned, and this is done via exchanges as equals, mutual consultation, comparative analysis, as well as give and take. Under political reform as currently constituted, there is a broadly representative nomination committee of 1,200 to nominate eligible candidates, after which one man, one vote by all enfranchised Hong Kong citizens will produce the chief executive for the central government's appointment. This systemic arrangement is the most effective way of expressing balanced participation at this stage. I'll go on to talk about three aspects of balanced participation. The first is the legal constitutionality of balanced participation. The Chinese Constitution is the ultimate or most fundamental law of the country. It possesses unimpeachable or supreme legal authority. The Basic Law of Hong Kong is formulated by the National People's Congress, or NPC, in accordance with the Constitution. And it is from the Constitution that the Basic Law, the embodiment and legalization of one country, two systems, derive its validity. In interpreting the Basic Law in accordance with the Constitution, the NPC, the most authoritative institution of the country, is giving vent to the Constitution and exercising China's sovereignty over Hong Kong. Balanced participation, which had been a guiding principle for the drafting of the Basic Law, was enunciated yet again in the NPC's August 31st, 2014 decision on universal suffrage in Hong Kong. It possesses full legal constitutionality. The second point is on the political compatibility of balanced participation. In truth, one country is the precursor or prerequisite of two systems. I believe this is also the political perspective most shared by the people of Hong Kong. To properly understand one country, two systems, we have to be clear about two facts. One, Hong Kong is not a country in and of itself, nor is it an independent political entity. Second, a high degree of autonomy does not equate to absolute independence or complete self-rule. In the light of such national political characteristics as centralization of power, a unitary state, the NPC, and democratic centralism, the powers wielded by local administrative regions are not inherent in them. Rather, they stem from the delegation of the central government and evolve from the exercise of national sovereignty. There is no legality without authorization, therefore, and legal responsibilities must be faithfully executed. The Hong Kong SAR cannot define the scope and contents of its own powers. There is no question of implicit delegation and residual power. Should it hold for powers that have not been stipulated in the Basic Law, the Hong Kong SAR must have authorization from the central government in the first place. As authorizer, the central government can supervise, guide, annul, or extract powers as it sees fit. With the NPC explicating and interpreting the concept of balanced participation, the central government is exercising its legal status and authority as the authorizer with ex officio political compatibility. The third point is on the procedural propriety of balanced participation. Universal suffrage is not the same as direct election. The former refers to each and every adult citizen's right to vote, whereas direct election is an election method, a modus operandi, if you will, that contrasts with indirect elections. Universal suffrage and direct election are completely distinct concepts. They are, however, confusable and easily confused. The former stipulates that the right to vote, such as one man, one vote, is the preserve of all and sundry. The latter relates to the way of exercising the right to vote, direct vote being an example. Historically, universal suffrage and direct elections sometimes converge, but they also diverge at some other times. There could be universal suffrage without direct election, such as in the United States. On the other hand, there could be direct elections without universal suffrage, like in the 19th century Britain. Women did not have voting rights. Thus, implementing one man, one vote is genuine universal suffrage. This we must note. Balanced participation is a way of implementing the right to vote. It is not mutually inconsistent or even mutually exclusive with universal suffrage. Direct elections or indirect elections. Procedurally, it is altogether proper. Democracy and the right and the rule of law are both indispensable to the proper functioning of contemporary constitutional mechanisms. The promulgation of balanced participation underscores, on the other hand, the precedence of the constitutional rule of law over democracy. The existing legal system must be respected. The rights of others, society's right to self-determination as well as public rules and order must not be impinged upon or violated. Social divisiveness and confrontation, which leads all too easily to policy short-termism, must not be fomented. Rather, the objective is to rectify the shortcomings of precocious and defective democracy and to erect a preferred model of direct democracy plus public rationality founded on public interest and accountability. On the other hand, having been affirmed by the legal process, balanced participation will in effect systemize and legalize democracies, imparting legitimacy to the chief executive, enabling him and the HKSAR government to wield their legal powers. This will help make democracy rational, legally circumscribe wanton power, and elevate democracy from symbolism and substantialism. The crux of the supposedly trade-off between equity and efficiency lies in balance and inclusiveness. That is to say, how to forfeit the minimum amount of equity, which is the cost, for a maximum degree of efficiency, which is the benefit, or to lose as little efficiency as possible, cost again, in return for as much social equity as possible, the benefit. Balanced participation fosters compromise between and among the different interests and pressure groups within society. It promotes the peaceful coexistence of civic-mindedness, collective rationality, and social harmony. It facilitates comprehensive participation, even as it brings out the efficiency gains of centralized nomination. Thus, balanced participation has met such governance criteria as justice, fairness, effectiveness, efficiency, and accountability, while striking an appropriate balance between equity and efficiency. Universal suffrage for the election of the chief executive is a milestone in the development of democracy in Hong Kong. It signifies the determination and sincerity of the central government. It also represents the collective aspiration of the 7.2 million people of Hong Kong. And now we are just a stone's throw from this historic landmark. We have to cherish the opportunity, get on with it, and fortify it. At present, society has divergent views on the contents, objective, scale, and speed of democratization. I fear that if these differences are not resolved or breached anytime soon, political reform will not be passed, impeding our democratic development. The chief executive represents HKSAR as well as the Hong Kong government. His legal status is doubly authorized by the central government and the local populace. His election and appointment must be embraced by the Hong Kong people, and he must have the official approval of the central government. For this has to do with one country, two systems, and Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong. These are absolutely vital issues that defy debate or change. Given present reality, it is already a significant step for our democratic development that the central government has authorized the HKSAR to introduce universal suffrage while also cementing the process with constitutional law. We should cherish the prospect and be justly proud. Meanwhile, we have to remember that throughout history, universal suffrage is not a slam dunk, nor is there a one-size-fits-all paradigm. Be it the central government, its Hong Kong counterpart, or people from all walks of life, there is insufficient experience with universal suffrage. A longer gestation period and gradualism are in order on many fronts. We have to respect ideal and reality, support democracy and progress, and come to grips with electing the chief executive by one man, one vote. Meanwhile, I hope that all of us will see that our political reform is like rolling a boat against the tide. If we don't press ahead, we'll be swept backwards. If the universal suffrage as currently constituted is not passed, we'll for sure be at sea as to how to relaunch political reform. We cannot afford to go to extremes. We must not make a sacrificial lamb of Hong Kong's social stability and economic prosperity. Rather, we should think hard on how to arrive at consensus on how to improve balanced participation. In the meantime, we should waste no time with implementation so we can learn by doing as soon as possible. The current proposal on political reform fully reflects the systemic requirements of balanced participation at this stage. It has both inherited reality as it is and reformed it too. It has preserved what works in the existing political setup while reflecting the interests and aspirations of most Hong Kong people. Its point of departure is Hong Kong's legal status and practical circumstances, having full regard to the well-being of society as a whole. It is orderly and gradual. It breaks new ground. As such, it is a remarkable step forwards and one that we should persevere with. Now I'm going to talk about the synthesis of balanced participation and effective governance. The governance of contemporary society needs to be democratized and scientized. Meanwhile, people from all walks and strata of life have to play a more active role in society's management. This is modern-day two-way interactive governance process. In this connection, balanced participation will motivate people to participate in politics, rational decision-making, and civic governance. This will lead to effective public management. But electing the chief executive is just the beginning. There is a lot more on the agenda. First, maintaining the rule of law. Without a doubt, this is the most important thing for Hong Kong in every aspect, from preserving the one country, two systems to improving governance effectiveness. Second, enhancing government's administrative capabilities. The chief executive elected by one man, one vote, as well as authorized and approved by the central government, enjoys strong legitimacy. This is a major prerequisite for effective governance. In the wake of his election, and as efforts to form a government get underway, all channels of communication must be kept open and unobstructed. Further, the chief executive designate must reach out and recruit able and like-minded individuals to form an efficient and industrious executive team. This team will be supported by Hong Kong's high-quality civil servants. All executive measures must be fair, just, and suitable. All administrative procedures must be kosher, proper, and user-friendly. Those in the renegation of duty should and must be held accountable and legally responsible. Third, improving executive-legislative relations. Pursuant to the Basic Law and the bill governing his election, the chief executive is to have no party affiliation. Contrary to conventional perception, political parties in Hong Kong are merely political organizations or groups that can provide checks and balances against the executive branch of the government only by virtue of the legislative council seats. These have led to prolonged bipolar confrontation between the government and the LegCo. What can we do about this sorry state of affairs? A chief executive elected by universal suffrage will have greater legitimacy than otherwise and will, in all likelihood, better reflect people's interests and aspirations. And he should proceed to invite select members of political parties with substantial electoral votes to serve as secretaries and undersecretaries of policy bureaus. Policy discussion and formulation, as well as political consensus, will be easier to conduct and reach in this way, particularly with the help of consultative organizations, on which I have more to say later. What is, in effect, a coalition government that has co-opted the support of many electoral members will minimize internal friction, heighten administrative efficiency, and maximize social well-being. Fourth, strengthening the consultative institutions. We have a unique consultative political model in Hong Kong, with the government establishing over 300 consultative committees that advise the many parts and activities of the government. Throughout the policy-making process, they can assist with feasibility studies beforehand, consult and counsel as the measures are being implemented, and help monitor and evaluate results and progress. In this way, we can assemble popular opinion and civilian intelligence, facilitate compromise, and enhance governance effectiveness. Moreover, the experienced and capable individuals working in these institutions can be tapped in due course to fill civil service and political vacancies. We can make these bodies and the whole consultative institution more effective by recruiting more people with different political and policy orientations as members, and possibly as chairman. I strongly believe that diversity will result in better ideas and decisions. Plus, it is always better to resolve differences over words in meeting rooms rather than fighting them physically on the street. Fifth, nurturing and attracting political talent. Public discourse often laments Hong Kong's relatively lack of talent in politics, particularly when compared to mature political jurisdictions such as the United Kingdom. This is not exactly fair, as we had, until quite recently, been an apolitical administrative entity. But in Singapore, a city-state whose name has often been invoked in any discussion on Hong Kong, there is a systematic and long-term program to nurture political talent from as early as the secondary school stage. The crème de la crème would typically be recruited into the ruling party and subsequently the government. If, in future, our own chief executive is indeed elected by universal suffrage, presumably he or she has a certain degree of charisma, his or her legitimacy has been greatly enhanced. This, plus the prospect for members of political parties to serve in a de facto coalition government and not just as the opposition, will incentivize people who want to serve Hong Kong and make not so much money, but a difference. 6. Taking youth issues and concerns seriously. I don't want to refer to the problems of the youth, as that sounds too negative. So I use the phrase issues and concerns instead. These involve not just the younger generation, but also the elders. Not only Hong Kong's presence, but her future is at stake as well. It is quite understandable that youths should demand change. We must take their upbringing and development to heart. Instead of telling them to be satisfied with what they have got, we should make society as upwardly mobile as possible, such that they can realize their greater dreams and aspirations. Thus, for instance, we can set up a higher-level youth affairs coordinating committee to help mitigate issues and concerns that are causing the younger generation anxiousness and even restlessness. The zest and passion of young students are the mainstay of Hong Kong's future. We need to galvanize them to map out a future for Hong Kong with their wisdom and intelligence. In NATCO and other consultative organizations, for example, we can increase the proportion of youth representatives. This with a view to creating more platforms and opportunities for them to have their say in public affairs, be heard, and feel important in their own right. 7. Strengthening communication and cooperation with the central government, as well as the Guangdong Provincial and City of Sunjin governments. We have to strengthen cooperation and exchanges with the central government. We should actively participate in the central government's formulation of strategies for economic development and globalization. We should give free rein to our unique functionality to service China's grand economic development scheme. This is one of the prerequisites for enhancing the governance effectiveness of the Hong Kong SAR government. We should augment our cooperation with the mainland's provinces and cities, especially Guangdong province and the city of Sunjin, with a view to increasing interactions on all fronts. This is, of course, this is of significant to the effectiveness of the SAR government. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no denying that Hong Kong has been overshadowed in recent years by negative sentiment. This is especially the case over the past 2 years, when internal disputes over political reform intensifies, culminating in occupied Central and related street protests. As a result, there is a lot of pessimism. We don't seem to be going anywhere with our international competitiveness. If anything, we are slipping behind as places like Shanghai and Singapore post noticeable improvements. People's livelihood cause greater and greater concern as inequality of income and wealth increases and the housing situation worsens. Meanwhile, we spend the bulk of our time in a mutual blame game. Immigration is becoming the talk of the town again. But to foreigners who live amongst us or who have been following our development, this is beyond comprehension. Their impression is that our economic activity has been robust. There is full employment. Economic prospect looks promising. Our tax rates are low by international comparison. We continue to be ranked the freest economy in the world. An international agency thinks our healthcare is the most efficient and effective worldwide. According to various international surveys, our educational system continues to be among the top performers year in and year out. The city is safe, streets are clean, and we are famously convenient, sporting world-class infrastructure. So why all the gloom and doom? In the past 2 months, I have had the opportunity to revisit Israel and Singapore on business, talking with some of their senior officials, among other people. I have been struck by the care and determination that their communities have shown towards nation building. This is in stark contrast to Hong Kong. Now, obviously, we are not, as I've already mentioned, a country in and of ourselves. But the collective built Hong Kong sentiment, which is among the all-important determinants of our future, seems to be conspicuous by its absence. If we continue to spend our time and energy on internal bickering to the neglect of improving our global competitiveness and people's livelihood, then downhill we'll go for sure. There's now only half a month before the Legislative Council votes on the current political reform proposal. I sincerely hope that, in the view of Hong Kong's long-term well-being, the honorable members will vote in its favor. Passing political reform, coupled with the measures that I have suggested for improving governance, will better reflect popular opinion and advance Hong Kong's long-term well-being. There will be improved policy formulation as well as implementation. If all this comes to pass, then under the auspices of the central government and guided by the principle of one country, two systems, Hong Kong will radiate and dazzle again. Over time, it will be an even better place to be called home of this, and our future generations can be justly proud. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Leung, for your insightful sharing. Please remain on stage. Thank you. I believe our audience may have follow-up questions for Mr. Leung. If you have any questions, please raise your hand and our duty staff will give you the microphone. We would appreciate if the questions be asked in English, and please briefly introduce yourself. Any guests have questions for Mr. Leung? Yes,
Way back.
the guest over there. Thank you.
I'm from the UK, and the party that I support with all my heart has been roundly defeated in the last general election, but I thoroughly support the electoral system in the UK, which I regard as a genuine democracy. Now, Anthony, my question to you is just a simple one, which is, do you think Beijing will make a better offer next time?
Thank you for your question. Mr. Leung, please.
Well, without making progress, there may not be a next time. So let's get these passed first, and we'll talk about it going forward. After all, as I said, any country's, any region's development in democracy is a gradual process. Nobody has shut the door, and I believe that going forward, as long as we are moving forward, there will be room for improvements.
Thank you, Mr. Leung. So, any more questions? Any guests have questions for Mr. Leung? Yes, the guest over there. Thank you. Thank you.
Anthony, thank you very much for a very insightful speech. If I can get a copy, I think I would take a few hours to understand the intricacies. But I think the question I want to ask is, you mentioned that Hong Kong indeed needs political talent. And education, you also mentioned that Hong Kong is one of the best performing. But do you see political education as being important? And if so, the available political programs in Hong Kong, can that be supplemented by studies in the different countries, including China and the UK and the US? How do we go about encouraging and broadening the political abilities of students who, as you said, are our future leaders in the next decades? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Albert. I have given a copy of my remarks to the university, so I hope that they can either send it to you or put it on their website so that you can actually download it. And obviously, any comments will be most welcome. After all, it's only through discussions and debate that we can really improve ourselves. But in terms of developing political talent, obviously, a lot can be taught, but it's also really a topic that should be really practiced, and you can learn more from the practice rather than in the classroom. After all, if classrooms can teach everything, then clearly the world would be a lot better because we taught a lot of things in classroom, and unfortunately it may not be practiced. The issue really is how to attract talents, able people to enter politics. As I said, in Singapore, they have a very systematic way in attracting, firstly identifying, then attracting and retaining people in politics. But unfortunately, in Hong Kong, we do not really have such an environment. If anything, a lot of people are saying that why serve in politics? Because after all, If you enter politics, chances are you have less freedom, less privacy. You are subject to public scrutinies and worse, unreasonable attacks all the time. But these are really kind of universal issues. But a lot of people in other areas still would enter politics because they would like to make a difference. They would like to serve the community. But unfortunately, if we do not solve a lot of the issues that I talk about, particularly if we do not improve the relationship between the executive and the legislature, then the chance and the ability to make a difference is greatly reduced. So I hope that with improvements in the executive and legislative relations, and also through inducting more people, including people with different political and policy orientations, into the various consultative committees, into the various political parties, and through them, maybe joining the government, we can attract more capable people to enter politics.
Thank you, Mr. Leung. So any more questions? Okay, so the lady over there. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, for a very fascinating speech. My name is Shirley Lin from Chinese University of Hong Kong. I think it's very interesting that you mentioned Singapore and Israel, because both of those places, first of all, we're not a nation state, as you mentioned, but both of those places have recently had similar protests like our Occupy Central, and it's because of the young people saying that it is not only economic opportunity that belies them, but actually they also have an identity crisis. And through all the polls in Hong Kong, we also have that problem. So my question is, do you think we need to change our education more towards creating an identity so that young people can identify more with being Chinese? Or is this something that it's such a controversial issue in Hong Kong? How do you propose we look at education reform in terms of national education?
Well, very good question. Thank you. I'm not exactly sure whether the so-called discontent in Singapore or in Israel is all because of the issue of identity. Identity is important, and I'm all for kind of students learning a lot more about their identity through the study of history, through the study of culture. It's probably not just Chinese culture, but I mean, really the culture of many different Greek civilizations. But understanding history, particularly Chinese history, I believe is important because after all, we are part of China. But I believe a lot of the discontent around the world is either a direct or indirect result of a widening wealth gap. As you all know, the wealth gap in the world is probably the worst in history. World Vision earlier this year published a research report saying that the wealth of the top 1%, meaning the wealthiest 1% of the people, their wealth is equal to the rest of the 99% of the world population combined. Now, there are many reasons, like globalization, like technology, which clearly improves our lives. But on the other hand, as we all know, in a network economy, it's a winner takes all. But technology is also destroying conventional jobs. There is a report that suggests or that predicts that in the next 15 years, 2 billion jobs will be eliminated. 2 billion jobs is actually close to half of the existing jobs in the world. And on top of that, since 1971, after the US dollar somehow was delinked from the gold standard, fiat money was, and still is, the way of creating money, which means that central banks and countries around the world can increase their money supply at will. So, and we have seen that after the so-called global financial crisis in 2008, central banks around the world has been printing money. Printing money, as a result of that paper currency, is actually losing its purchasing power. So all these kind of macro issues, and they're all global issues combined, is making the world's wealth gap the worst in the history of the world. And unfortunately, these are all trends that I do not see reversed kind of easily or in the near future. In Hong Kong, obviously, we have our own issue, such as we did not really have a supply of land after, I think, 2003, so much so that the property prices in Hong Kong is unreasonably high. So all this issue in Hong Kong, as well as around the world, is causing the youth to ask, is this a fair society? Where is the opportunity for us? So while I think identity is an important issue, the economic so-called injustice, as well as many other issues, are causing the youth around the world to be discontent. And I think our government should pay attention to all of this. Obviously, there are many issues that we have to tackle, but I believe there are at least 3 issues that we should be kind of paying attention to. One is housing issue, because if the young people feel that after even a decade or 2 of struggling, they cannot still have their own property, chances are they'll be very unhappy. Secondly, we should think about ways to promote social mobility, to give them the opportunity for upward mobility. How can they have their fair chance and be able to prosper in this new age, in this new world? Hence, recently we have been talking about, besides kind of getting a good job, people should think about innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. So upward mobility, I believe, is also important. But lastly, we should also think about giving our young people a greater say in the management of the society. And hence, I suggested in my remarks that maybe we should kind of think about increasing the proportion of young members in the various consultative committees. And maybe young people in Hong Kong should actually form their own political party to participate in next year's Legislative Council election, and also have a chance to participate and be involved in the new government after 2017 as well. So I believe that we should at least pay attention to these 3 areas, and hopefully we, meaning young people and us not so young people, can really work together for the benefit of Hong Kong.
Thank you, Mr. Leung. Let's welcome our last question.
Any questions? Yes, the guest over there. Thank you.
Yeah.
Antony, you just draw us a very nice picture if we can get the political reform passed, a proposal passed. Well, based on the present situation, the chance of getting this political reform proposal passed is very little. So if it does not get through the Legislative Council or get it passed, what will be the situation of Hong Kong? It's the same as it is, getting worse? If it is really getting worse, how bad it would be? Thank you.
Well, I've said in my remarks and in other occasions that we are really rolling, it's like rolling a boat against the tide. I hope that we can get on with it. We can really pass the political reform bill and focus on bigger issues such as how do we improve the economic competitiveness of Hong Kong? How do we pay attention to the less fortunate people in the society? How to improve housing, and also how to involve everybody, including our young people, in the society's management. But I'm afraid that if it does not get passed, the government may continue to be involved in a lot of these internal bickerings and may not have the ability to move a lot of their kind of reforms and measures forward. Then I'm afraid that our competitiveness will decline further relative to our competitors, that a lot of social issues will not be resolved, that our society would be a more discontented society, and that is something that nobody here would like to see. Hence, I appeal to the Legislative Council members to really use their vote responsibly. Hopefully, they can support the current political reform bill and have Hong Kong focus on the more important issues after the voting of the bill in mid-June. Thank you very much.
Once again, thank you, Mr. Leung, for your inspiring sharing. Please be seated. Thank you.